ever. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. Henry David Thoreau.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
And welcome to everybody to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle brought to you by Still and Moving Center every Saturday. And I want to particularly give a warm welcome, since this is our week of the Sacred Home. And we have with us Tony Bonnici, with the parents who created his sacred home, Andy and Diana Bonnici. And I think that really in terms of affecting the quality of the day, which is mentioned in the quote that Bob Bussey read aloud for us, that this having a platform to move into our day from, of a sacred home is so important in terms of how the whole rest of the day actually unfolds. And so I feel really fortunate that I have had the opportunity to visit Tony in a number of his homes, actually. And no matter which physical location I visited, I always visiting there have a very strong sense of the sacred, a place where each individual in the family is honored, and that it's a place where the family as a whole comes together and gathers their strength and nourishment. And so Tony, coming from a Zen Buddhist background, is going to speak from that perspective, and he may touch on a few others as well. So Tony, I'll invite you to take it away.
Thank you very much, Renee. Honored to be here with everybody. Thank you so much. Great to be back and see familiar faces and new faces. So always excited for that. When me and Renee started talking about me doing this, the topic of the sacred home, I really started to first, the focus for me went outward of what is the sacred home outside of myself. And then as I started to look at what I've created or what I create throughout my day, that it actually started to point inside in me, first and foremost of the sacred home that's within inside myself. And so that looking at what is a sacred home for me is the expression of the internal experience that is happening inside. You make it present in your outside world. And so that when I start to look at that, that's I get excited and I get nervous of what is that relationship between my internal and outside world, and how do I express that? And so what I want to pose to this group here, and we're going to get into some questions and discussion about, is what is the sacred home for yourself? Just look inside and check in of what that actually means for you. And we'll circle back around to that as I talk and go through this to see what comes up, and maybe it'll change as we go through it. Also, I want to bring a question of how do we cultivate and nurture the sacred home? How does that actually become an expression and continuous thing that is taking place on a moment-to-moment and day-to-day basis? When I reflect to those questions, I came up with three key ingredients to that, to be able to really create and sustain the sacred home. And the first one is the acknowledgement, that you actually acknowledge that the home is, or the place is, a sacred home. And I'll speak more about that. The next one is creativity, bringing creativity, the internal guidance of the gut instinct, the Kanden, the hara, God, that has a voice that will create an external part of your world. And that's being very creative to listen to that. And the last one is ceremony, is what is it to actually hold and nurture the ceremony of the sacred home, not only with what is happening inside of you, but happening outside of you. And so for me, that those three pieces, from being acknowledgement, creativity, and ceremony, that these pieces are what make a whole of the sacred home. And so, you know, as a boy, when I was growing up and I was able to be in a Zen home temple that I grew up in, I was a part of creating it, maintaining it, having a relationship with it. And back in the day of me being a young man or even young child, that I had no concept of what was taking place in this relationship with sacred home. It didn't come till later in my adulthood, when I was really able to identify the process that my mom and dad started to really embed in who we are and how we create our external world. And so that side of being in a Zen temple and growing up in that environment, one of the main takeaways for me with that is that every space is just like an altar or a place that I really care about, nurture, and love to its fullest. And that doesn't matter if it's the bathroom, if you're pulling weeds, any of those washing dishes. It's all the same. It's as if you're really bringing that intentionality and focus to cleaning and really being in relationship with the space that you're in. So that for me just like brought that out of, like, when Renee speaks about my homes now as an adult, that I can really tap into that and listen. It's not something that just happens where, you know, the house is designed overnight, but yet things come into our space and our world, anything from plants to different tapestries, that it takes time to develop all this. So I really want to honor and thank my mom and dad for instilling that side of myself and being able to come into spaces and create that way. So thank you very much. Yeah. The second way that as I did become an adult, and I've been training and practicing at judo since I was 6 years old. Me and my brother even took it to the Olympic level and went to the Junior Olympics. And so as I came into my early 20s and or late 20s and early 30s, I started to want to give back and really start to perpetuate what I learned in judo to the next generation. And so it entailed us, where it started out, where we opened 2 different dojos, me and my brother. We had a dojo in Marin County that was in a subdivision of cement buildings, basically a commercial buildings, all just this big square building. And then our other dojo was here in Hawaii, and that was at a Zen temple, the Hongwang-ji. So we had the dynamic of, when I was looking at this, of wow, to look at a space that pretty much you look at and walk into that has nothing, that doesn't have that initial feel to it for me. And then to have the contrast of the Hongwang-ji that is really nurtured and taken care of as a sacred space for over 50 years. So it has that lineage of that. And so as I created the other dojo in Marin County, I really started to have to tap in and look at what inside of me, what meant to be that sacred home, and create that from that place. So, you know, for one of the things that we did is we brought in hardwood floors into this commercial building, and 1,500 square feet of flooring to really bring out the sense of nature and wood and that, and put a mat system in there that really held the space that we could practice and train on, to a bell that we would ring before we would sit and meditate. Those kind of things that rose that building to the occasion of being the sacred home that it has always meant to be. And so I got to go through and you know, I brought the acknowledgement of it into both those spaces, and I'd really drop into noticing and seeing it as a place of practice, a dojo, and creativity, of really letting it develop and be designed from my gut instinct, and letting it evolve over time. And then for me, holding ceremony, meditating with 50 under 13-year-old kids, boys and girls, and having that space on multiple weeks and weekly basis to start and end class, and then get physical and play. That's that sacred home to me. So when I bring in these three pieces, acknowledgement, creativity, and ceremony, to go through the acknowledgement, when I would walk into my home in Northern California, our temple, we had to do something that most people in California didn't do, was take your shoes off. And it's so normal here in Hawaii. It's a real treat to feel the sacredness of every home that way. But when it was, you know, in the 70s and no one was taking their shoes off to go into a house, that was something that everybody did as a way to acknowledge that sacred space. So, you know, cool being in Hawaii and really being able to feel any home I go into, it kind of brings that up to me, that I'm entering into that kind of reverence or sacred space. The acknowledgement can be as simple as a bow. The bow, as I walk through a threshold into Renee and Cliff's house, I notice myself doing that, and I can feel their sacred home, and it's a way of me being in relationship with that sacred home. So a bow is another way to do that. And then moving into being
that the creativity is, you know, listening from inside to bring out to how the space is supposed to be created. It's not something that an architect designs and then you put all the pieces in the space. It's something that you listen deeply when you're in stillness and silence, is a great space to do it. And as I'm smiling to say this, is I love the aspect of shower, shitting, and shaving. Like those three things can bring on insights like you've never experienced before. So sitting in stillness and silence, and one of those other threes as an interesting way to say, wow, if I did go buy a plant today as I'm washing my, as I'm shaving my hair, that I follow that thread, and I'm like, yeah, it'd look perfect right there, and I go with it, you know. So that creativity. And then the ceremony of, again, bringing ceremony in, and that could look like anything from prayer to meditation to, you know, creating a flower arrangement in the space to honor it as that sacred home. So those are three ways that I can see and that I cultivate sacred home. And I would like to hear from the group and what they feel is a sacred home and what it means to them. And wherever we go, Renee, I'm ready to go. Thank you.
What a lovely organized presentation that we could easily follow with acknowledgement, creativity, and then ceremony. And so that gave us, I think, a wonderful framework for actually considering this topic. I wonder, somebody may want to answer Tony's question, and maybe we want to lead up to it. Does anybody have a memory, a strong memory of walking into a place that you felt as if was a sacred home? And it doesn't necessarily, I think, have to be a personal family home, from the standpoint that Tony is talking about, even his judo dojo. Mm-hmm. In a sense, you can create a feeling of home. So, yeah, does anybody have an experience of walking into a place that felt like sacred home to you? And that might be kind of a way of kind of unraveling the thread, or unwinding the yarn ball. Yeah, Bob.
Well, once my wife Adela and I went to Sedona, Arizona, and we went to a place called Bell Rock,
Mm.
and they took a picture of us, and the expressions on our face are just amazing. We're smiling in a way that, was just so deep and centered. And we didn't even know it, but we knew we felt good. And that's one thing that kind of jumps out at me, although other places in nature sometimes do that, in a quieter way.
Mm.
Oh, so you weren't even inside. You
No,
were
this
outdoor
was
space.
outside. We went to this place, kind of a viewing area, to look at a big rock formation called Bell Rock. It's a huge, in Arizona there and New Mexico, there are a lot of these kind of rock
Very
formations.
sacred space.
Yeah, and they're said to be, well, Bell Rock has said to have a huge crystal in the middle of it, so they're vortex centers as well. But all of that was irrelevant to the feeling that we had
Right.
of this place just really changing us to, we're here with this, in a way that was very home like. In Zen, there's a saying, this very place is the lotus land, this very body, the Buddha. Except you don't usually get to experience that very well. I mean, this was an occasion.
Yeah, Bob, I'm experiencing it from you. What you were feeling right there, I could actually feel that sensation in my body. So it's like I was at the Bell Rock, right? I mean, I could really feel that. Hey, Bob, what is a sacred home to you?
Well, I very much identified with the way you expressed it, but a couple words did come out for me as you were talking, and I think, sort of inspired me to talk about them. One word that came to me was Sangha, a sense of community. Uh, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the three jewels of Buddhism, and it just struck me. Sangha is part of that being at home in the world with others, and that community can really support you. I mean, anyone who's meditated, it's 100 times easier to meditate in a zendo than it is to establish your
Right.
own isolated meditative thing. And the other thing, it's kind of connected to that, was also, as you were talking about doing things, the idea of samo, of work-related practice.
Mhm.
And I guess that kind of becomes home to me too, a sense of practicing. And I guess I'm thinking of my home internally as you did, of kind of a sense of what is my true home, what is my true being. And I think of that very much as kind of Buddha nature.
Mm.
Um, the other thing that came up to me was just the importance of, in terms of home, this striving towards the home. And I'm thinking of, like, in the great vows, the Bodhisattva vows. Vows are important to establishing a home. So those are just thoughts that came up as you were speaking, really.
Yeah, great. Took two more areas, vows and group, like Sangha or groups. Definitely feel both of those as the sacred home. Thank you, Bob. Mary, how about you?
Thank you, Tony. It was interesting because when you were talking about sacred places, I had the opposite. I've walked into places that I back off from.
Ooh.
And I think that's good to recognize things like that, because it also will direct you to a place that's safe.
Yes.
When I think of home, I think of safety.
Nice.
And it's really interesting. Why did that come to me, where you can walk into a place and go, no, that's not for me.
Yeah.
My home, I have had people tell me that they feel so safe when they come to my home.
Mm.
And our home has always been open. It doesn't matter if I'm in the home where I am right now or in past domiciles, we've always tried to welcome people. And I like to say that's a Hawaiian thing, but it's not. Every culture has their way of welcoming people.
Yeah.
So, yep, that's what I take
Okay.
away. But thank you.
Can I give you a question?
Okay.
How do you nurture that sacred home, your own home? How do you nurture and create that?
I pray, pray, pray.
Yes.
And I just extend that out to every person I've ever met, every person I've heard about, and the ones that I have no idea, but God knows who needs help. So prayer, prayer, prayer.
Thank
And
you so
blessing
much.
the home. I'm
Yeah.
a firm believer of blessing spaces.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mary.
How do you bless your space, Mary?
If not by my daily prayer, I have holy water from Fatima. I have holy water from the Sea of Galilee. My son, when he was in the National Guard and he was stationed over there, he brought me back a bottle of water from Galilee. So I can go through my house, and if I'm feeling, something needs to be repaired or something needs a little extra help, I just sprinkle holy water.
Beautiful. Diana.
What I was thinking, Mary, I was in the same place as you were. For me, sacred ritual is part of creating that sacred place. And when I open the doors in the morning, as we go around and open all the doors, it's like I let in light and love and I send out light and love. And we have different rituals of prayers that we do during the day, but we start the day with prayer and meditation, and we end with gratitude. And so I think for me, the way that we work with sacred ritual is really important to keep the home and ourselves, our inner selves, in a sacred acknowledgement, and that the rituals help me to be able to acknowledge that and live that.
Very nice. Thank you. Diana, what is a sacred home to you?
Oh, thank you. I think it's both. Like you said, for me, the sacred home starts inside myself, feeling at home. And then it's that feeling that I'm safe in being held and loved by divine love and divine wisdom, and that I can move out from that. And then it's also my home where I live, and it's keeping, we have altars throughout the house, and we have ways that we nurture that feeling, and people will come in and say it does feel like a sacred place. And whether it be outside, Andy does so much things on the outside as well as inside. So I think there's something around both places, but then it's like we're in this rental for Thanksgiving. It's like, this is a sacred space. Oh my goodness, our family's here. We're celebrating with gratitude and just feeling so much love. So for me, it's extending that out with taking it wherever I'm at and trying to live that sacredness in my every moment.
Thank you.
Carolyn, see your hand up.
Well, this is kind of an oddball example. My personal family dissolved when I was a sophomore in high school. But some years later, after I'd come to California and I'd contacted the religious movement Theosophy, I went back to New York City one summer. And I'm not quite sure why I went to New York City. I knew at some point I was going to Michigan to visit with my father. And I was in a bookstore, quite a famous one that the New Yorker had written about. that had all kinds of books, but certainly ones that included spiritual books, visionary books. And they had highlighted this woman who then I saw and I introduced myself. She was the creator, the manager, and all that. And we talked a bit, and it was right before 4th of July, and she invited me to come to her apartment in New York City on 4th of July. So I went, and as I got to the top of the stairs, first I saw a beautiful statue of a teacher of wisdom named William Q. Judge. And then when I went in and we had lunch, and it was all very exciting experience, but what I felt is that she had, first of all, she had a humility, but she had an incredible connection with, you might say, the whole world. And she had a loyalty. And I find that very striking, that she had a loyalty to seeking, to tolerance, whatever you want to bring up. And that struck me as making of your dwelling, you might say, a sacred place. She had this loyalty to really the world, or to humanity. And I do think that's something that makes a difference in just ordinary families. Is there some connection that's being made to the larger world? It's not just, you can have families and everybody seems to love each other and laugh together and all, but it's really very insular. So I would say that for just like Tony was mentioning, the going within. I think also to make a family, or to let a family develop, it needs to, and the parents should start this with young children. It needs to have an awareness, a connection with the larger whole, whether you want to refer to it as humanity, or the world of diverse cultures, or whatever it is, so that the children grow up with a positive view towards engaging in the larger world, and see that that's part of extending whatever positive experiences they had within their nuclear family. They can be a stimulus and a source of creativity, imagination, to a much larger vision, and hopefully even a sense of a global am I unmuted? A global vision, you might say, and to see, and to then learn how to enjoy that, and to bring their contact with others and the larger world into a larger circle of appreciation and enthusiasm for other people, not just their, and that they experience something like the best moments within their nuclear family.
Thank you. How about you, Kevin?
So I was thinking about this because prior to working here, I worked at Cirque du Soleil, so I traveled a lot. And I think that, prior to that too, I did arena tours. So many times, like, I think I've taken a nap or taken a shower in almost every big arena around the country. I stayed overnight at the Barclays Center one time when it was snowing. So I think that in my particular instance, I would always take things that were meaningful to me, like on tour with me. So I would take, like, I don't know, a favorite pillow, or just some art to hang up in our apartments or whatever, just to make it feel a little bit more personalized and home, because we were on the road pretty much 11 months out of the year, and we missed family, celebrations, birthdays, births, weddings. So just to have something be part of you to continue on. And I think a lot of those instincts were just instilled upon me by parenting, or grandparents. So I think that has a huge influence. And I know that it was very interesting. I saw a movie not too long ago. I can't remember the name of it, but it was with a really, really scholarly psychologist. And she was talking about trauma patients who go through EMDR. And a lot of times going through that traumatic event raises your anxiety and, relives basically the horrible event. And one of the calming mechanisms that the therapists use are focusing on that safe place, or your home, your favorite home. And I think that's interesting because I think I brought it up before. For some people, I don't think they've had a home, or the normalistic home. But you think of some of these troubled youths or anything like that, their idea of home and what ours might be are two different things. So it would be interesting. I often think if that person really went through such a traumatic event and maybe changed multiple houses or was in an orphanage or something like that, they really have no identity of what that safe, sacred space is, because it's constantly changing, or with different people. So I thought that was a very interesting point about using that as a grounding point, but also it's a little bit, I would see, frightening for those people that don't have a definition of what that would be.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I like, to me, what I'm hearing is you create a sacred home by bringing personalized pieces with you, and anywhere you go, and that creates your sacred home.
Yes.
Thank you. That's a nice piece. Cliff?
Well, I was trying to figure out what you meant by acknowledgement. Acknowledgement, and then creativity, and then what was the third one? Ceremonies. But for me, the idea of acknowledgement means to try and establish a purpose for your home, and to have it be a place where one does feel safe, but for a purpose, where one gains, strength, but for a purpose. And so it's a place that we can come to and re-nourish ourselves, or charge our batteries, or whatever, so that we can fulfill our purpose. So even the home itself ultimately should have a purpose. And I think that purpose has, something to do with giving. Ideally, you'd want yourself and your home to be a center of light. So it's like what Carolyn was saying about the person that she got invited to. It seemed like that person had a clear purpose for herself and her home as a place to extend outward from. So I think, is that something about the idea of acknowledgement? Is that?
Yep. I like that. Yeah. That's a way of acknowledging it, bringing a purpose in. Cliff, what's the purpose of your home?
Well, just that it's a place where we tried to, when we rebuilt the house, tried to rebuild it in a way that it would be a place of welcoming to others to come and who needed a retreat or refuge for a while, and to get their foundations back under themselves, their footing. So it would be a place we wanted to actually attract people to it, be a place of magnetism, so that when people came, they felt very, very comfortable and had a chance to decompress, say, from possibly their own hardships in life, and then go back out into the world stronger. So I think that's right, Renee. That was kind of our purpose.
Nice.
That was a
It feels
joint purpose, a joint purpose.
good. It feels good in my body. I can feel it again. Like, when Bob spoke about the bell tower, I can feel your purpose coming through you into me. So thank you for sharing your purpose of the house.
So one of the, I'll recognize you in just a second, and I just wanted to add on to what Cliff was saying and Tony's question, that he came into the house while we were, I think, building the walls. And, it was fairly early in the stage of building the house. And let me know, and the construction manager know, that he wanted a huggable house.
Yeah.
And as he said this, our construction manager was already standing there with his arm around this coconut palm column that is one of the supports that hold up the roof. So he was already hugging something in the house. And then we went on to have quite a few rounds and curves, and where we could smooth over sharp edges and corners. We did that as possible, or filling gaps, and just I think it does contribute to a overall feeling of safety, security, comfort. Yeah.
A huggable house. I love it.
Andy.
Okay, so I just wanted to go back to acknowledgement, because I think that's really an important piece as a beginning piece. I think for me, it's the acknowledgement of our own sacredness. It's like you have to really understand experientially and practice your own sacredness. How do you experience your sacredness? How do you experience not only your own sacredness, but the sacredness of each moment, and the sacredness of all of nature and the universe as a whole? From that place, you naturally want to express some kind of relationship to that sacredness that's beyond you and is you. And that's part of the expression of ceremony. That's part of that expression of extending it outward too, whether it's to inanimate beings, or to family, or to others, in the world. And so always understanding there's a nourishment of sacredness within yourself, and how you practice that interiority with gratitude, and going outward to express it in ceremony in such a way that offers you refuge and guidance in your everyday life and relationship. That's really an important piece, because wherever you are, if what you built as a sacred home, or your expression of a sacred home, is not there, but you're somewhere else, knowing your own sacred interiority means wherever you are, you want to express that sacredness in some way, in some simplicity, that you can wake up and acknowledge it, that you can go to bed and honor it in just the simple form, whatever that is. Whether it's lighting a candle, saying a prayer, just doing it as a daily expression of being a human being.
Thank you.
I feel like I should, at this juncture, it's so perfect after what Andy just related, I think, share my Honu story. What do you think, Tony?
Sure.
So some of you already know this story, so bear with me. When we first came to Hawaii, it was to do an emergency construction job, and we were just suddenly called across the ocean to perform it, even like 3 or 4 months before we were scheduled to. So we just picked up and came over, and Cliff started to work on this project. And that job led right into another job on the islands, led into another job, led into another job. And all of a sudden, having lived in Santa Barbara for decades and having planned on being there throughout our retirement, we found ourselves in the middle of the ocean in this wonderful place. It was just not where, at least I'll just speak for me, where I ever knew I was going to live. And then that was even a little bit more complicated by the fact that we had 3 kids in a blue ribbon high school in Santa Barbara, still going to school. And Cliff was working now full-time on the islands, and so I was in Santa Barbara with the kids, or on vacations, we would come over and spend time with Cliff. And then as they started going off to school and the rest of their adult lives, I got to be kind of going even more back and forth between the 2 places. So we had our wherever we were living in Hawaii, and we had our place that we had raised our kids in Santa Barbara. And it was very disconcerting for me. I had the schedule, I called it my 10-20 schedule, of spending 10 days in Santa Barbara a month, where I was on the board of the Institute of World Culture, where Carolyn Dorrance is still there as the president of it. And so it was, very sacred work to me to be contributing to that. So I was over there 10 days a month generally, and then back on Oahu 20 days a month. And my symbol of being disconcerted was, I never knew where the peanut butter was. It always felt like I had just bought a jar of peanut butter, and I'm going to open the refrigerator, and dang it wasn't there. Well, that's because I bought it for the other home. And this going back and forth, I just, I don't know, I just found it disconcerting. Now, when I first came to Oahu, I was very drawn to the honu, to the sea turtles. And I didn't at that point in time consider myself very much of an animal person. And I nevertheless kept finding, as I was driving around the island, myself pulling off anytime there was a beach or a landing of some sort, or I thought I might be able to see a honu. I would get out of the car, and if I saw them, I would jump in the water and swim with them. It was like really out of the ordinary kind of behavior for me. And I didn't know why I was doing this. And a friend of mine in Santa Barbara who had studied Native American traditions a bit gave me a book of Native American totem animals. And she said, well, why don't you look and see what the turtle represents? And so I did. And it was something about the turtle's the one who goes between like the spirit world and the regular world. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting, but that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me, I think, a few more years of actually getting used to going back and forth until, well, one of the experiences I had while I was in this limbo land was whenever I was in Santa Barbara, Hawaii seemed like vacation land to me. And whenever I was in Hawaii, Santa Barbara just seemed very far away and dim. Like I could only have one reality alive at a time, it felt like. But then as time went on, I felt like they could both be alive. And I started just at some moment and went, oh, I know what the Hono means to me. Turtle is the one who carries his home on his back. So wherever he goes, he's always at home. So that's a long way of agreeing with you, Andy. to say that yeah, like there's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It goes something like this: though you traveled the world over to find the beautiful, you will not find it unless you carry it with you. Something like that. And this is comforting to me when I think about, oh, okay, yes, you have lived in a renovated chicken coop. That's true. That's where I was living when Cliff proposed to me. It was out in somebody's backyard. I lived in the renovated chicken coop.
Not much of a dowry, not much of a dowry as I get.
And I've also lived in this beautiful home that Cliff and I have created, and many other places as well. And then I think about, you know, what's going on in places all over the world, including Ukraine, where people who have had normal, wonderful lives and homes all of a sudden are completely divested of any semblance of the home they've been accustomed to and that they have created for themselves. Aloha, Robert. Nice to have you. And how could I survive a experience like that? And then I have comforted myself saying, I guess I just have to remember my Honu principle. Even if I have nothing else, if I carry home on my back and within me, I'll be okay.
I'd like to add a little point to my example of earlier.
Great.
This woman had created and maintained the most extraordinary bookstore that certainly in New York City, and she had grown up in the era where the Congress was making certain books illegal to import or to sell across state borders. And so her bookstore was the embodiment of tolerance, and at a time when people were getting interested in, you know, something like Hinduism or various traditions in Africa. So it was very unique. And that was part of her globalism. And that reminds me that one part of making a home sacred is that the parents, the occupants, and the children bring books into the home. You can really, it's sad to go into a home and there's not a single book. Maybe there's the Bible. And that also for music and art. So part of a sacred home could be, at least we could say classical, if not sacred books and music and all of that. So that would help bring parents together with children, and children have a stronger interior understanding of the, in a sense, human capabilities. So that was an enormous contribution that she made, and that was very central to her global vision.
She had a very strong purpose, is what I hear.
Robert has a home that one walks into and just immediately it gives one a feeling of being in sacred space, dedicated space. And
well, that's because you meet Krishna as you walk in. Yeah, it's true. It's hard not to look someplace in our house where you don't see something that reminds you of the spiritual. But I was thinking about what everybody said, and it seemed like, from one standpoint, every home is sacred because of the fact that it is the place where souls inhabit, right? Just like every body is sacred, not in itself so much, but because of its inhabitant who uses it. But for it to be manifestly sacred, every home is kind of like a base camp for the service of humanity. And that's both emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, on every level or any level. But it just strikes me that ultimately is what makes a place or a home sacred, where it's a place that's dedicated to the service of humanity, because that's the way you can serve the spiritual. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Robert.
In terms of maintaining a sacred home, I want to know what everybody has to say about when things go awry in a home, when there are angry words or, something goes down. I mean, down. How do we bring it back up? I wonder if there's something about this three-part process of acknowledgement, creativity, and ceremony that might help us.
Things go awry. As you're saying it for me, that it brings up my grandmother, that when things go awry, there was a ceremony. It was called, you're going to sit with the person and hold each other's hands and look at each other's eyes, and until there were words spoken and it got solved, you don't let go or quit looking. Right? It was like a little protocol she would have for, especially me and my brother, but that was that was what we were going into, right? Is that.
Oh no, we have to do this again. Oh no.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's one way we did it. How about somebody else?
Bob.
It's funny, 'cause I wanted to ask that same kind of question. And I guess I was going to frame it more of, nirvana, the spiritual home, and samsara, the kind of world we're living in. And the context is last Saturday and Sunday, I was very ill. I couldn't urinate. And so it was getting worse and worse and worse. Finally, on Monday, I went to urgent care, and they drained about 1 liter of liquid and put a catheter in and checked my blood and diagnosed me as diabetic 2 for the first time. And well, where did that come from? Samsara, karma, all this stuff was kind of wrapping around. And I know one answer is yes, and all that happens, and you come to it with certain spiritual resources. But there's a saying in Zen, if Zen is so simple, why is it so hard? I mean, because we're living in this world. I wonder, Tony, if you could talk about that a little, that whole sense of being in both worlds at once, of having two answers,
And just so I'm clear on the question of that the experience of having two answers, and that like either cognitive dissonance or the tension between that.
Like the koan says, the great cult of fire at the end of the world. At the end of the world, is that cult of fire burning? And the Zen master says, no. The student goes to another Zen master. He says, is the cult of fire at the end of the world, is it still burning? And he says, burning, burning. Two answers.
What's your answer to your own question?
burning.
I was feeling that.
It's part of the question, Bob, how do we feel at home in both samsara and in nirvana? Is
Well,
it possible to be at home in both?
Well, yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, at some point, we're talking like the spiritualization, the sacred. I loved what Cliff said about refuge and a sense of how you make this home sacred. It's like having your source in the Buddha, having your affinity in the Buddha. And then suddenly, last week was a real circus, and it's like, yeah, okay. I at one point I was sitting in bed doing zazen, but that was it. About an hour of sacred and a lot of other stuff. So yeah, I guess how do you do that, or what is it? Why is there two? I guess what is home? Because I was home all 24 hours 7.
Right. As you're
Like
describing.
Andy has.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
so sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Dad.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Bob, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Bob. I think when you were talking, I think that's really an important question, because we're in the experience of that, every day. And to understand to completely understand that samsara is our home and the sacred is our home in samsara. Oh my God. That's crazy. But so in that way, it's like there's creativity and randomness. There's oneness and wholeness. And then you've done nothing wrong, but you're called to live deeply as a human being through physical pain, through emotional pain, through hurt and forgiveness. That's part of the work of humanness. So yeah, it's just part of the passion of being a human being, that that there's no separation between the samsara and the sacred, between your body and the rest of and the depth of reality and the existence of all beings and things. In that way, it's like you're living, and that's part of how I look at it. We're all living in boundless intimacy. It's just understanding what that means in our body, that intimacy is with pain, that intimacy is with forgiveness, that intimacy is with samsara, that intimacy is with the vastness of sacredness and the blessings that it offers us in everyday life, like breath and heartbeat, like creativity and wonder and curiosity and love.
Thank you. That's kind of it. How do you make room for that sacred? And when can it, when does it go away? When does it come back? I thank you very much for saying that.
Here's a koan for you, Bob, from another tradition. Is the universe doesn't exist, only Brahma or Brahman exist. The universe is Brahman. So nirvana and samsara at the end of the day are one. But from another tradition, you're looking at nirvana and samsara. From another tradition, the Hindu tradition, to look at Renee's question about what do you do when things go awry in the household, you could look at the Hindu tradition of the gunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva. And it seems to me that a lot of time, I think what we're talking about with the sacred home is it has to do with energetics. And tamas is a lot of times what it is a stuck energy. And like in our shop area, for our construction company, I refer to these areas in our warehouse as clutter bunnies. There's areas that just think that they just get clutter, just gets stuck there, and it builds on itself. And that's tamas. But what we want to do is somehow through like feng shui, through the idea of, I think feng shui has to do with wind, air, and water. In other words, movement, through transmute tamas into sattva, into light, into that purity. But we have to go through rajas. So there's got to be these ceremonies and all these different activities to get the energies unstuck so they flow in a harmonious, pure, healthy, and giving, compassionate way.
I think that somehow your energy has managed to do that for all of us, Tony. It just feels like we have created this circle of connectedness amongst all of us here on the screen that I feel comfortable in, I feel safe in. I feel like I can share my heart, share my mind, and feel held by every single one of you in this space. And I don't know, is it possible to have a home on Zoom?
I think we're doing it.
I'd like to just say thank you so much, Tony, for starting us off today. There's something about you as a human being and the way you speak and communicate that just creates that kind of safe space and invites everybody into a place where we can really kind of in a safe way look into our own hearts and find our center, find our own sacred space. And having your parents on board today makes me understand where you're getting it from. And hearing those stories that you as a family shared today, as well as everybody else. But it was a very, very good meeting to have the day after Thanksgiving, or 2 days after Thanksgiving, I guess now, where with the theme of it is thankfulness and gratitude. And that definitely seems to be a strong part of a sacred home, is a place of gratitude. And we are very grateful to you, Tony, for giving us this opportunity to come together and share a safe Zoom space. So
Thank you all. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all for your participation, and thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Love you all.